Hi, everyone. So I'm going to jump straight into our presentation because, as Sophia mentioned, it is quite a packed hour. And I will say we might go just a few minutes overboard, even though I'm going to try and stay within our hour. So I'll share my screen. 1 moment, share. Okay, Sophia, can you see my, okay, cool. So I just want to dedicate this talk in memory of Nourel and Roya Mansouri, sisters. They were murdered in the Nova Music Festival on October 7th. And in prayer and action for the safe return of all the hostages and the end of the war, and in memory of Itai Svilsky. Actually, when I first gave this lecture at the end of December, this slide was praying for the safe return of Itai Svilsky, Mirav's brother, who was then murdered on the 99th day of his captivity. And maybe what I want to just kind of, I want to tell you what we're going to do and what we're not going to do in this hour. So what I'm going to look with you just a little bit about at art from 2023 before October 7th, so that there's some kind of understanding of what was going on here in the art world and how it was reflecting politics. And then we'll move into art following October 7th. And I'm saying following October 7th because I'm actually not looking at art that is done now 4 and more months later. We're really going to look at the immediate things that were emerging and I think managed to capture some of the emotional climate that was here and possibly will give an understanding of where things are at now due to what that was. And I will mention once in a while throughout the hour what we're not mentioning, because this is just one kind of point of view. And as I mentioned, we're going to start a little before. And this is a still from a video by an artist, Yael Bartana, possibly one of the most world-renowned Israeli artists. She's actually going to be representing Germany in the upcoming Venice Biennial. So we could have a whole lecture about her. And this is a still from her video, her latest video, Light Unto the Nations. I'm assuming most of you know that sentence. In Hebrew, it would be Or LaGoyim, thinking of the nation of Israel. I mean, the traditional thought of the nation of Israel is a people that should or are supposed to be or are destined to be a light unto the nations. And in this video, she kind of imagines a post-dystopian world after climate disaster with this crazy spaceship leaving the land of Israel, going to the space and rebuilding humanity. For those of you who are versed in mystical Judaism, the shape of this spaceship might remind you of the 10 Sfirot, the 10 emanations that in mystical Judaism are the way the world was created. And this is on purpose. So one aspect of what was going on here is also a lot of thoughts about climate change, about the disaster our world is in, and kind of imagining other futures. And then we have the art world, which pre-October 7th, like the rest of the country, was very much occupied and preoccupied with the judicial overhaul, coup, shift, depending on your political opinion is how you think of it. And we can see here kind of an image from the Ayalon Highway from a kind of impromptu exhibition called Draw Me a Fist, artists kind of talking protesting the judicial overhaul. This exhibition, by the way, was taken down by the police a day after. So it managed to be there only during the one night it was hanging. And a lot of the art world, which is generally left and liberal, and that's true for most of the world and for Israel, was very much engaged in these protests. But it's important to also understand that there's a whole other side to this and to the art world. And at the same time, you can see this exhibition invite and image from an exhibition that was in Geula Gallery in Jerusalem that was called Fractions, Destruction, Disengagement, and law, and was actually looking at the effects of Israel's disengagement from Gaza in 2005. And this, again, this is way before October 7th. The date here is the date of the closing of the exhibition. So the exhibition itself opened way before, and it exhibited works from the years from 2005 and until 2023. This is a painting by Porat Solomon from 2005 called Disengagement. And another work that was displayed in that exhibition by Yona Levi-Grossman is called Wheatfield. You can see it's from 2018. And Yona Levi-Grossman was actually one of the founders of Yamit in the Sinai desert that was evacuated during the peace process with Egypt, and then was one of the founders of Enabso, which is kibbutz in that part of the Negev, which is around Gaza. Obviously, she's now evacuated and a refugee from her own home. But we can see that the mindset, and it has a lot also to do with the judicial shifts within Israel, were very much also on the minds of the art world from both sides, whether looking at the lack of trust in the system that was deeply rooted also in the disengagement, or the lack of trust with the system deeply rooted with the relationship between secular and Jewish society. So these things were part of what was going on here. And I want you to see this work by Avner Pinchover, and this is from July 2023. In Hebrew, it was called Zman Mamad. Mamad is the name of the safe room, which you might have heard quite a lot after October 7th. He named it in English panic room time. And again, this was before October 7th, just so we can understand how much this was on people's mind. And this work, as you can see here, it was created in an art gallery at a floor that was no longer built, but still had this special window of a panic room. And he installed an army pillow that basically inflates the window and opens it up. This is a speeded vision of that. And you can see over here, the window opens, and then these two hammers kind of slam it down. And this work was created actually in memory of a child that died in Sderot in the south of Israel due to a rocket attack. And again, this opened in July 2023. So you can understand that what happened in October is meeting an Israeli society and an art world that is engaged with all of these things. It's not from nowhere. Trauma and the rifts are here all over. One moment. Okay. And we're moving to October 7th. I'm gonna make a couple disclaimers. First of all, I'm not showing any shocking images. Okay, they're relatively, it's not, I know the title of the session is What Does Shock Look Like? Maybe one of the things to say is that shock doesn't always look like the most shocking image. It's sometimes something else. And I do want to, the image you're seeing is the gallery in Be'eri, the kibbutz on the border of Gaza that was very heavily assaulted. The gallery completely burnt down. Alongside it, what burnt down the photography exhibition of Osnat Ben-Dov that was there at that time. That exhibition has now been remounted in a gallery in Tel Aviv that is currently dedicated to Be'eri Gallery until they can return there. And I just want you to notice how this image, again, created before October 7th, but suddenly the delicacy of it, everything is infused kind of with those events. And another image I want to show you is this work by Ziva Yalin. This is the artist, who's an artist and curator, again, that lives in Kibbutz Be'eri. Her studio was obviously there with these paintings that during the attack were damaged by bullets her studio was then kind of also evacuated from there, and the Israel Museum in Jerusalem purchased one of her paintings that is also scratched by the bullets to now be part of the collection. And again, you can see how suddenly the art is infused also with reality, but moreover, notice that Ziva Yalin is a painter living in that area on the border of Gaza, painting her kibbutz and surroundings in this blood red. Okay, because it's 20 years of living in that reality. It's not obviously the surprise on October 7th or the shock on October 7th was immense, but still we can see by these paintings that it's not new. And I'm showing these, and now I'm making a little kind of disclaimer. We're actually, other than this, not going to look at institutional works and responses. There are currently more and more exhibitions opening and that were opened in response to October 7th, but we're not going to look at those. And one other thing we're not going to look at, but I do want to mention to know there's a whole kind of stream of this relationship between art and the reality, is this campaign or work by Nitzan and Dede Mintz, who October 7th found them in New York in a residency. There are a couple that work together. And being far away and not knowing what to do with themselves, they created these posters, which I'm assuming for many of you are quite familiar. And these are the posters that became the ones that were reprinted and pasted across Israel and the world. And this is actually not any institutional or governmental campaign. This is two artists that felt the need to do something and set out to do it. And there are many, many responses, both in Israel and across the world, that are artistic responses that are about raising awareness and bringing it into public space. And again, we're not going to look at those, but I want us to be aware of the fact that they do exist. So what are we going to look at, and why am I showing you some of my works? Prior to October 7th, and COVID is a very good example. If you ask me about artwork that directly engage and immediately engage with reality, I had quite a judgmental and condescending approach to that. In my eyes, art takes time. It's not immediate. Artists don't respond immediately. And I was very wary of those types of responses. Like many other artists, even though I was doing stuff before October 7th, once October 7th came, I couldn't draw anymore. I was just not, I was volunteering and doing stuff, but definitely not, my art was just like put aside. And then towards the end of November, I found myself starting to draw, and I realized that everything I'm drawing is actually infused with what I'm going through and the images that are coming in, whether I want to or not. The colors, black and red, suddenly were added, and the images completely shifted. And I realized that I need to rethink this whole idea of art as an immediate response, because if it's happening to me, maybe I was too judgmental. And I started looking and gathering, and a lot of what we're going to be seeing today are these types of works, an immediate response by artists to the events in a way that possibly can capture something that words can't capture as well. And I want to start with this, which is actually words. This is a work, and I think it's the only work I'm showing by someone from one of the kibbutzim. This is a work by Adi Drimel, who's from Kibbutz Re'im in the Negev. And basically, you can see here the title, Re'im Group, My Home. So kibbutzim are very small. This kibbutz is 300 people. And then there are WhatsApp groups for different parts and age groups of the kibbutz. So this is the name of the WhatsApp group of her kind of age group. And what she did, and this is like 2 days after October 7th, she took the text messages in that group from 8:20 a.m. to 10 a.m. and just started writing them in a mandala, just somehow taking that event that was so hard to understand even what was going on and giving it some kind of form. And you can see here what, in one of her interviews, what she said. And a lot of it is also about trying to give or concreteness to something that is very hard to even hold onto. And these texts actually allow something like that. You can see with this piece of paper that the only way to read it, you either need to turn the paper or you need to turn yourself, but there's no way to calmly read this text. And so with what she's doing, on the one hand, she's creating this repetitive moment. On the other hand, if you look, it seems like everything is being pulled into this center, into this void. And even the ones that are easier to read because they're in their directions, just reading a piece of them is scary. I mean, here it's written, they're trying to enter my home, be silent, Yoav, take care of yourself. So these are things that are happening in real time, and people kind of trying to stay in touch with each other while these things are happening. Let me just move this so I can, okay. And if we saw in that image the need to kind of, for a repetitive movement, a lot of the works that were emerging during that time were, first of all, emerging on Facebook and Instagram, which I'll say on the first day, on October 7th, a lot of the information, I mean, it was so confusing that basically I, as many others, were following friends on Facebook that are in these kibbutzim that were basically crying for help and then saying goodbye on Facebook. So these became kind of the arenas also for these images to appear, but also a lot of what started happening was that people were creating works kind of that you can create at home that in a way are very small, but also that allow a lot of just doing something with your hands. And here you can see this work by Noah Zeni. You might recognize this is the shoreline. This would be the Mediterranean. This is the marking line between Gaza and Israel. And then we see these red dots. And this is actually taken from this map, which I want you to see for a moment. That we'll send it to you in the follow-up email, but this is a link of the massacre that happened on October 7th with each, and in the map you can kind of zoom in to, I'm sorry, this is not easy to see, but you can zoom in. This is from the music festival and you can see the different names of people, or you can zoom back out. And actually what was happening at the time, it was such a mess that civilians were starting to map what was going on and figure things out, and then sharing this information with the army. But the need to somehow make sense of what was happening, as no one understood fully what was happening, led to a lot of works, both like this that are really trying to gather the data, but also in the art world that are trying to grasp onto something in a very kind of detailed way. I just want to note that also in this website, there's also a breakdown of the women's stories and what happened to them. And this is being updated as more and more information is coming in. And you can understand maybe in a way, I mean, you can see now when you see these dots, it doesn't make sense, right? You can't embroider a dot for each person. It just doesn't work. But something of how unfathomable this reality is, with the need to somehow create a mark that makes sense of it, leads to these works. Another work here is by Daniela Meller, and that's what I mentioned, a lot of embroidery. I think a lot of need to have the hands busy while the heart and the head can't deal with what's going on. The name of this work, which is also embroidered here in Hebrew, is I Saw Cows Walking Among the Bodies. And you can see, I mean, what you're seeing here, the black lines are actually also embroidery. It's all embroidered on a kind of bandage, which incidentally, these bandages are called Gaza in Hebrew, long other story of why these bandages are called like this. But you can see that it's a very, very delicate fabric. It's actually a bandage for in the army for wounded people. It really is frailing at the end, and to embroider it, you need to be very, very, very careful. And obviously, this takes a long time. And I think once again, it's kind of gauging or understanding what is impossible to understand, and just making the hands busy while the head can't wrap itself around reality. I want to show you a couple works by Zoya Cherkassky, who kind of also, she's trying to relate directly to what's happening. This one, Israeli Guernica, which I'm assuming many of you are familiar with Picasso's Guernica from 1937, one of the most famous modern paintings of war. And you can see the references to that over here. And there were also with time quite a few artworks emerging that are related to art history. I do want you to see here that it's also on paper. Almost all the works that emerged immediately were smaller works, things that people do kind of at home or faster, not large works that are fully kind of thought throughout time. And another work by Zoya Cherkassky, kind of using imagery in a way from the newspapers, from videos, and depicting the people fleeing the Nova Music Festival. And I want to say something about also the difference between fine arts and illustration, and between an internal conversation and one that is directed to the world. Because if you see this is obviously more towards illustration and not fine arts. And if you notice, it's all in English, okay? And it's very, very communicative. It's a very powerful work, but you can see that there's also this need here to somehow indicate to the world where we're at. There was a sense, and still is, but there was a sense of a huge gap between what was going on here, what we were experiencing here, and what the world was seeing and relating to. And I think this work by Maayan Guri is extremely powerful, just this feeling that we're stuck in time on the 7th. And you can see that all of this in English, it's way more dedicated towards the world than internal. And I will say that there are many, many, many illustration works, stunning and amazing, that we're not going to go down that path, but I think it's an important one to acknowledge. And very often the illustrations were directed much more towards the world than an inner kind of dialogue and process. These are works by Andres Gurevich, and you can see the title, A Moment Before the Music Was Turned Off. I want to talk about what these images are based on, and then how they're created, because that's, I think, again, merging between the content and the way of the medium, or the way of the creation of the art. So basically, in music festivals, in case you don't know, there's usually a professional photographer, if not 3 or 4 or 5, that take photographs of people so that while they're dancing, they can be completely free of that thing of needing to take photographs. And then those photographs are uploaded to a website, and people can have their photos, find themselves in the photos and have photos of themselves. That's something very, very common in music festivals. And that was done in the Nova Festival. So was originally photography that was done for the beauty of the festivity and for people to be able to have memories from this music festival, ended up to being a tool to identify the dead and the hostage. And basically the party photographers who survived, and or their cameras and photographs, were shared then with the army and the police to help identify the people. And what Andres Gorovitch did, basically, he took these photos and started drawing them in a way, kind of giving them the festive original meaning. You can see these are done with markers. And once again, what I mentioned, that need for repetitive movement, that need to create an image that needs time to be created. And you can even see here at the bottom of the drawing, kind of, and you can see it here too, and in all of his series, that kind of color coding, which I think in the weeks, first weeks, especially following October 7th, the need to somehow make sense of what happened is apparent even in the way of work, in trying to catalog things, and trying to follow images that are happening, and trying to create some kind of system within the chaos. And so many of the works are actually series. Because artists, what we do is think in images. Most of us weren't going to the studio. We were volunteering in any way possible. And whatever art people were doing was kind of along the way or at home. And you can see here an example of a series of drawings by Chen Balali. And here I just first took a screenshot of her Facebook page, just so you can see kind of. And she says the news was open all the time, and she ends up drawing images from that. At some point, the news is on silence, and here what's written is the 12 hostages are transferred to the hands of the Red Cross. But in many ways, what artists were doing was using their tool, but just following reality. And we end up having series that are almost a testimony or a document of what is going on and as it's unfolding. These are works by Shoshke Engelmeyer. Shoshke is kind of hers pseudonym, and he started creating these daily postcards. Again, online and on Instagram, not physical dimension, although some of them were later printed. And I want you to see, first of all, that these are directed inwards to Israelis, right? They're in Hebrew. It's not about being understood outside. It's about expressing something that was happening internally within Israel, and he created one each day. We can see here a few. Hayi Shalom Pink. Pink, it was the pseudonym of this graffiti artist, Keren, that was held hostage in Gaza, and then we learned of her death. So this is Goodbye Pink. Here we have Shiri and the Redheads, Where Are You? Shiri and Shiri Bibas and her two young children, 4-year-old Ariel and now 1-year-old. Now when he was kidnapped, he was 9 months old. Now 1-year-old and 3 months. So Shiri and the Redheads, Where Are You? And here you can see the kidnap sign, and you can see here the caption, How do you explain hostages to a 4-year-old? And here you can see Save the Men Too. So as you probably know, in the hostage deals, the women and children were released, but the fathers and the grandfathers are still there. And this horror of having, like, the joy of having people back, but then knowing that they are not returned. And here you can see a very interesting thing, again, completely directed inwards. You can see here this Israel, the map of pain. So you have here the valley of suffering, the spring of mourning, the hills of suffering, the way of torment. So all the sea of tears. And then this is also by Zev Engelmeyer. And then someone wrote to him on Facebook, We're all in pain. Can you please give us a map of hope? Okay. And the day after, he put this on Facebook, and this is Israel, the map of hope. And you can see here the waves of love, volunteering, visiting injured, civil initiatives, solidarity, babysitting for families that have men in reserve duty in the army, hills of compassion. So, and here you can see in the map legend, this map legend has sweating, lack of breath, heartbeat, feelings choked and dysfunctional. And here you can see kindness, helping, volunteering, compassion, and generosity. And you can see in many ways, I'd say this is a good double image of the reality here, as well as the conversation as people are creating these images and have responses. So just for instance, a woman who lost her father in the October 7th attack actually wrote to Zev Engelmeyer and said, listen, we're having a funeral. Everything is so sad. My father was such a funny, smiley man. Can you create for him a happy poster that I can have on the day of the funeral? So these things are happening, and there's no distance in a way between art and life at this point. And these two works, I'll show you one and then the other, by Tzela Greenberg, are on old papers of Kupat Cholim, of kind of a hospital or a family doctor, and how they would write on it the health situation. And here the title is Toldot HaMishpacha, family history. And you can see here this woman lying here, and we have no idea if she's dead or asleep. And in this one, you can see it's what's written here is actually what's written here under the column of the name of the inspection. And you can see it's written self-portrait reading news, self-portrait fighting with people online, self-portrait checking if deal was signed, self-portrait checking alerts. And in many ways, the art reflects this I'd say this intensity and still the need to somehow give it a face. This is a screenshot from Meidad's Instagram. There are way more, and these are portraits of hostages. But unlike initiatives that matched between hostage families and painters and artists to create their portraits, in this case, this is Meidad just doing this for himself, having the need to somehow give a face and some intimacy to this horror that is like 1, 2, or 3 steps removed. And he mentioned, by the way, that he doesn't limit himself to be extremely realistic. He does sign with their names, but kind of allows himself to look at the image he has and just go from there. And since October 7th, this is what his Instagram looks like. And he just has been doing this. These are works by Reuta Simini, also drawings. And what I want you to notice here is kind of the difference or the dissonance between the inner and the outer. I mean, you can see here the women and children returning, the men still away, and the difference between the upper and the lower. And over here with this, she's sleeping, but her heart is open. And the title of this work is Ani Yeshena v'libi el. That's a sentence that comes from Shir HaShirim. I am asleep and my heart is awake. And for many of us, I think that the difficulty to even sleep at night was huge. I want to show you another work by her. And this is actually referring to 2 different stories or art pieces. I don't know, some of you might guess. And this is not a hat, right? But the original is not this. So I'll just share with you. The first reference comes from The Little Prince, okay? My drawing was not a drawing of a hat, it was a picture of a boa constrictor digesting an elephant. And we already have, I mean, you can understand, and again, this is a bit of a feeling of the difference or the gap between the experience in Israel and the way it's seen from outside, and how everything here looks different after October 7th, and how difficult it is to try and explain that to the outside world. But the other reference within this image is this work by Magritte. This is not a pipe, one of the most famous surrealist paintings. We can take it one step further, and this is a kind of nice art history lesson. The name of this work by Magritte is actually The Treachery of Image. of images. And I think it's very powerful in terms of this work by Reuta Simini and kind of the feeling of trying to capture, but how treacherous the images are and what a gap there is between reality, between the emotions and what is portrayed and what is seen outside. Yes.
Just a second, but explain what the woman is doing in the image. I'm not sure everybody knows what's happening there.
Okay, so in this image, basically the mother is hugging and is completely over her child, protecting her from being shot or killed. And this happened in quite a few instances, sometimes successfully saving the kids and other times not managing to do so. So that's the image. Thank you, Sophia. And you can see here, these are works already a little larger, a little later, but still acrylic on paper by Noah Arad Yairi. And you can see a kind of version of the three monkeys, but a very different one. Like the not being able to look or to speak or to hear anything, but in a completely different way, and I think capturing very powerfully the sentiment. I'm just looking at the time so that we're in place. This is a work by Shai Chezkeli already from the studio, and I want to show you this one and another one, and you can see here the title of the work is just this, okay? And in many ways, it's trying to capture the turmoil, the density of emotion, without giving us much, where I'd say that there's no horizon or where to run away in this painting. And I wanted to show you this other painting by him because I think it was done in November, and I think helps understand another layer of what was going on here. A bus exploding in the hills. And Shai Chezkeli, like many people of my age, experienced the Second Intifada and he's originally from Jerusalem, and all the bus bombings in Jerusalem, but across the country. He lost his aunt in one of those bombings in Jerusalem. And you can see here what he does. If you look carefully between, you can see the scenery, the view is painted in a very classic, realistic way. It's the same painter who did this, right? If he wants, he can create a very kind of nice, picturesque painting of a view. And then on top of it, what he puts for us is this destroyed, exploding bus. And for many of us, in many ways, the traumas of our prior experiences and the people that we lost during the 2000 attacks just resurfaced. It's also very interesting to understand. If you remember when I started, I said that most of the art scene is liberal left. Okay, which is true. I mean, it's a very tiny scene, so I actually know the politics of these people because they're friends. And yet there's such a deep shock and shift in what's happening that everything that is surfacing at this point is not like thoughts or political thoughts. It's just the raw emotions of what is going on. I'm going to go over a few arts just more quickly, but you can see this thought of mothers, of what is happening to people in this painting that really feels as if it's painted with the fingers, kind of clawing through the paint and looking for the people, all the way to much more gentle works. Like these works by Ruti de Vries, tear earrings, acrylic on fabric, and in a way, how as time is going, this is what is wrapping us. And instead of, I'd say, adorning ourselves with jewelry, all that we have at this point are the tears that are flowing. These works are by Avishai Platek, Night at the Kibbutz for Be'eri, and you can see here night at the kibbutz for Nirim. For Israelis, these night lamps no longer exist in the cities. They exist only in kibbutzim. Like when you see this night lamp, you know the scene is in a kibbutz, because it's really the only place in Israel where you can still see these night lamps. And he creates a whole series that is dedicated, one for each kibbutz that was attacked. This work by Shira Glazerman called Temporary Burial is, these, by the way, are in centimeters, so it's much larger than that. The size I didn't translate to inches. It's pencil on paper. It's a huge work, and you can see it's graves and the flowers that are put on the graves. Why temporary burial? Because basically with all the people murdered on October 7th, none of them can be buried in the cemeteries of their homes because they can't go back there. They're all evacuated. So kibbutzim in the center of Israel hosted, I don't know how to say it, these funerals and burials as temporary burials in their cemeteries. So there were sometimes a dozen burials in a day in a kibbutz that the people of that place would line up and just stand there as the people of the other kibbutz would come and bury their dead one after one after one. This is a detail from this large work. And again, you can see the need, this work, having it this size and working with pencil, you can see this kind of need to somehow have the hands working, to somehow use the medium to deal with what is happening. I want to look at these works by Emmy Spald, and it goes back to this feeling of a diary, right? You can see in this one, 9th of October, the dates in, we write dates differently in Israel than in the US, and you don't need much explanation for this. This is a month later, and you can, what's written here is, how can I even understand that kids aren't sleeping in their own beds? This is from 11th of October. There's a normalization of the war, even though nothing is logical. And then a day after, she says here, on October 18th, I started volunteering in sewing. I had too much noise in my head and pain in my heart. The monotonous doing saved me. And that's what happened to many of us. We were doing stuff that isn't art and just trying to help people. And then I want you to see what's happening here. This is already November, and you can see here being an Israeli leftist, okay, and kind of the sentiment of what it is to be a leftist while going through this. These are depictions of the bombings in Gaza, and what's written here is, there is no way that this is the way, there's no way. And another one from November 17th with an image that was going through the newspaper of what was happening with the settlers in the West Bank, and this question, why is no one stopping them? And you can see in this way a kind of transition between what was going on. And I do want to share a few images and also say something about this. It's very hard, I think, when going through such a thing, to even see beyond this immediate pain. There were and slowly are works of people starting to look at what's going on in Gaza, but compared to the immediacy of the shock and the pain of October 7th, there's a huge delay that isn't experienced in the same way in the world at all. This is a work by Daniel Shushan with a very cynical title, Urban Planning, depicting the bombings in Gaza, and another one over here. And I do want to show this work by Raida Adon, who's an Israeli-Palestinian painter and actress who actually right now is in Paris. And you can see, this is Gaza in English, but Azaz Guernica, and how these images within the art world, they kind of belong to everyone, and how they're used in different ways. And it was very interesting to see this on Facebook within the art community, and people were asking, but what about what happened in Israel? And she was like, I'm mourning with you, but I also want to share what's happening to my other side of the family. And in that, I kind of want to share this work by Oren Fischel, which is a little more humorous, but kind of shows something of the huge feeling of a gap, the art world point of view, especially when you think of the fact that the Israeli art world considers itself, generally speaking, leftist and connected to the international art world, and in many ways felt extremely betrayed. And you can see here what he's painting. This is October 7th, and someone Israeli kind of crying, painting the destruction and the pain. You can see here the word Be'eri, the kibbutz, and then here you can see the day after, October 8th, someone Palestinian depicting the bombings in Gaza, and the whole world is over here. And you can see, I think this kind of shows something of the local climate and the feeling of the gap between what's going on here and what's going on in the world, and how things are viewed, a gap that is really even now very, very hard to bridge. I'm going to try and end in the coming 5 minutes so that we have some time for questions. And I'm kind of taking us back to this work by Sharon Shachar to maybe understand why that gap is so large. This is a painting actually of the Kotz family, who was entirely murdered, both parents and the 3 children, and she calls it an erased family graphite on paper, and basically it's created by erasing the graphite. I do want to put something optimistic, and this is a work by Nomi Tannhauser that is dedicated to beautiful young woman named Maya, who was running away from the Nova Music Festival, and she hid in the bushes as everything was going around her, and she was meditating as she was doing it, and she filmed herself on her cell phone, just reminding herself to breathe, the incoming breath, the outcoming breath, the incoming breath, the outcoming breath. She survived the attack. She was just hiding there for hours, reminding herself to breathe, and that she will make it and stay safe. And this is Nomi Tannhauser, the artist, creating this image. I'm gonna end with this photograph by Batya Holin from Kibbutz Kfar Aza. Before the attack, she was an amateur photographer and a curator, and she just had kind of a Facebook page of putting up photographs of where she grew up and where she lived in Kfar Aza. It's a beautiful area. Since then, she hasn't taken any photos. This was the last photo that she took. This is the door of her mamad, of her panic room, and these are the bullet marks. It's the last, she survived and curated this exhibition that was named Someone Answer Our Message Already, and basically it invited all of these artists. They each got one text message from that morning and created a work responding to that. And this work of hers was also in the exhibition, and until today it's the last that she hasn't been photographing since. Just before I end, I want to end with this image and 2 very, very different series of works by the artist Hannah Nushik Mannheimer. These are her works from the beginning of the war in Ukraine. She's originally Ukrainian, Jewish, living in Israel since the 90s, and found herself kind of following an Instagram page that was called Look for Your Own, that was actually uploading images of Russian soldiers to their families in Russia so that they can identify the killed. And she was simply looking at these and documenting these images. And then when we spoke, and you can see here, she allowed me to share this, even though she said I have to write, it's not for exhibiting or sharing, because she too, like many people on October 7th, stopped creating work. But as an artist, we just do, regardless of what. And what she did was just paint these glasses of coffee or water for herself. And to me, it's very powerful, the understanding of what the distance or the closeness does. When this, however close she is to what's going on in Russia and Ukraine, there's this inability from distance to look at things and respond to them. Whereas when things are so close, the ability to create any image that is as close kind of goes away. And I'm going to end with this image by Yael Oren Sofer, who is a painter. This is not a painting. It's a piece of clay with marks and fingers on it. And the title is simply this: When It's Impossible to Paint, Fingers on Clay. So I'm going to end now in favor of some time for questions. And if we'll have a moment, I might share a couple more images.
Shirel, thank you so much. First of all, really, thank you for being here with us. Take a breath. I think we all need to, okay? It was a very, very, and you'll see here the comments, a very, very powerful presentation, very emotionally charged, and also not easy to explain. It's not easy to explain how, it's individual, how each one of us feels, and how the artist process goes through. So first of all, really, I want to also, for me as somebody living here, some things that Shirel presented and brought up, I didn't even realize myself. So first of all, I want to acknowledge it and thank you, because we are all, wherever we are, we're struggling to come to terms with what's happening here. And I think that's the part of what's happening is the process through art. As you said, these are very immediate pieces. These are pieces that are made. A lot of it is crafts, just for people to use their hands. And we are all processing it. And this is part of it. So first of all, thank you so much, Shirel. It's really, we don't take, I don't think that any of us, we understand how difficult it is, and we don't take it for granted. So there are a lot of different messages. You can scroll through them if you'd like.
Yeah, so I'll say thank you for the messages. If you do have questions, please share them. I saw one question about cartoonists, and if I saw them, and yes, there are many, and I think both outside of Israel and in Israel, we could really have a presentation looking at illustrations and cartoons from both Israel and around the world. It's a whole different discipline, by the way, and we cannot cover everything here. And I do want to say one moment, how did you learn of these works? Artist webpage. So thank you, Helen, for that question, because really, I wasn't paying attention until my own drawings started coming out from me, and I had to put aside my judgmental view of immediate art in that way. But then, as I mentioned, so much of what was going on happened online, from the attacks on October 7th, and literally the news was coming from there and not from the news, because everything was in delay, all the way to these works. Also, I'm very privileged to be part of a beautiful Facebook page that's called References for Lecturers and Teachers of Art. It's a beautiful community of about 1,000 people that when we're teaching, we put there, hey, can you upload images? And what I do there, I put a question there so that I make sure I'm not only within my tiny circle, but that I can see what other people are doing. And a lot of them I got from there. And then the people I didn't know personally, I also emailed them or texted them to make sure I have all the information about their work. So there's no place to gather this. However, let me see if I have that. Since there are now so many exhibitions that are coming up, and there are a few online websites that are gathering both texts and images by artists. And we'll send them in the follow-up email so you can see them. And the exhibition I'm also showing in at the end of February, I'm one of 20 other artists. And there is still a big question about what is the place of this art within the art world and art history. right? Is this art? Is this self-expression? Is this therapeutic? I would say that time will tell. Some of these things will disappear, and some of these things will remain embedded in the history. And there are different approaches. There's currently a powerful exhibition in the Tel Aviv Art Museum curated by Dalit Matityahu that is all around October 7th with no work that is new. It's all curated from the collections archive, which is a very different approach. So there are different approaches. I see here a question: what has happened to the collaborative communities of Israelis and Palestinian, assuming there are any? And another, thank you, and I'll answer that in another amazing question by Brian Ratner. Is there any significance to there being few male artists represented in your presentation? That's fascinating. So I'll just answer about the Israeli-Palestinian initiatives. There is a strain on those. There are initiatives, and there were initiatives to help, for instance, the Bedouin communities who suffered from these attacks. There are hostages who are Arab, Israeli, Palestinian, Bedouins, and they're in captivity. They were murdered. They saved Jewish lives. There was no, the terrorists did not differentiate between women in hijab and Jewish Israeli women when they attacked. And even though there's a huge strain on the, in any case, very delicate relationship between these two communities, there are still initiatives like Standing Together that are doing a lot to put as much emphasis on what we share and how we help each other, as what's going on here is so difficult. About the male artists, that's so interesting, because usually in my art presentations, I kind of need to make sure that I'm balanced in a way, that I don't have everyone male and not enough female, because of the way I grew up in art history, where all the male artists are way more accessible in my mind, and I need to put that extra mile to make sure I'm not missing, like, completely off balance. In this case, it wasn't on purpose, as I took all the art that came through my way and then realized that most of the artists are female. First of all, many men are in the army. That's one thing. I don't know. Those are most of the works that emerged. And I don't have an explanation. It wasn't on purpose. It was just gathering what is and then presenting that. And Paul, you're asking, is there any new graffiti in Tel Aviv? Yes. Another whole different lecture and medium. And I will say that graffiti has never been more horrific for me. Some of it is just like the regular graffiti you'd see, but just names of people who are dead, which is terrible. So yes, there's a whole new horrific graffiti scene. And also the city is, and many cities are covered with posters of the hostages and the dead. And walking through the city, it's like a combination of trying to pretend things are normal and then being hit by an image of someone I know that is dead or a hostage. And I think there was a post by a Ukrainian woman that struck me very powerfully when she talked about war-life balance. Because as we're speaking, the war in Ukraine is still going on. Like, people are dying. These wars are happening across the world, whether our attention is there or not. And the way we feel them is so much to do with how close we are to the people that are going through it. But then being in it, this war-life balance requires a very terrible ability of repression and denial while trying to actually maybe still do something to make our world a little better, hopefully. I actually ended on time. Maybe I do just want to do one last tiny thing because you're here, and end. Let me just share the screen with two artists. this artist, Rabinovich, a photographer who was killed in the Gaza war. Quite a fascinating young photographer. You can see here just how much humor he has. This is just him capturing. He was a soldier, and basically he took one photo a day. This is a screenshot from his Instagram page. A very unique, beautiful eye of a photographer that we will no longer be able to experience. And another young, amazing man, Eitan Rosenzweig. And what we're actually seeing here is he studied in a high school art department, and this is his ending project. He then was drafted and he was killed in the war. This I couldn't translate. These are words in Hebrew that I cannot translate, and they are the materials that make the special ink that people write the Torah scroll with, and that's the name of the work. And he created this very, very long scroll with that special ink infused with like Jewish mystical images that you can kind of dive in more and more and more. A really amazing work. He was already on his way to he was in this art department as a high schooler. He was already in touch with a professional artist, looking forward to, once he's released from the army, to become an artist. And he too was killed in the war. So I just wanted to kind of share these two artists and in their memory. Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you again, Shirel. Thank you for being with us. We'll send up the follow-up link with the recording and links of the artists, so you can also follow them on Instagram, Facebook, because that's really the platform where things are happening. And yeah, I hope you have a peaceful, quiet the rest of your day. May we see all the hostages back very, very soon.
Yeah, may this war end. Thank you for being here, and have a good day.